Hey, this is former Blue Devil lineman Matt Skura. You're listening to Basketball Conference, the ACC football podcast. Go Duke, go ACC.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Basketball Conference, the ACC football podcast. My name is Joey Weaver. He's Mike McDaniel. Mike, one last season preview, and we could not possibly do this alone. You want to tell us who we got tonight?
Same guy we brought on last year, Tony Siracusa, managing editor, last word on college football, and this would be nothing if not fitting that we had plenty of technical issues trying to get the show off the ground, Tony.
You know what? You just roll with what you got and make it good. It's fine.
That's right. That's right. Tony, really appreciate you coming back and joining us. We had a lot of fun doing this last year, and we're going to do something kind of similar. Yeah. So if those who were with us and kind of remember the way we did this show last year, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through and preview the whole conference. We've gone through at this point. We've previewed every individual team, all 17 of them now. And we're going to go through. We've got 7 kind of macro questions about the conference that should hopefully help to piece it together a little bit before we really jump in. And then towards the end, stay tuned. We've got a week 0 preview we're going to do here at the end of the show. We got 2 games to talk about. We got to pick some winners here. So stay with us as we look to do that. Mike, Tony, you guys ready to jump in and preview the ACC in 2024?
Let's do it.
I'm good.
Here we go. All right. Well, number 1, let's start here. Big year for the ACC. We add 3 teams, all from the Atlantic coast. We've got SMU, Stanford, and Cal joining the conference. Of those 3 teams, how many combined conference wins will they come away with between Stanford, Cal, and SMU? And keep in mind, they all 3 play each other, so that'll be 3 games where you're guaranteed to have at least 3 wins to begin with. Tony, let's start with you. How many wins between those 3 teams within the conference?
I'm tipping my hand early here because, my thoughts on the conference are probably a little surprising. I know when I voted at ACC Media Days and voted through the conference and the order of finish, I had people telling me I was delusional. So my number for all 3 of those teams combined, if you're ready for this, is 14.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now, you want me to break it down?
Please do. That's a lot more. Yeah.
It's Stanford with 3, Cal with 3, SMU with 8.
SMU with 8.
I am big on SMU's offense. I am big on Preston Stone. I am big on Rhett Lashley's offense. Defense, a lot of questions to be answered, but I wound up picking these guys 4th in the conference. And so, I wavered between 7 and 8 and gave them the benefit of the doubt and went with the 8.
So you've got them 8 and 4 overall.
I do.
How many conference wins?
I've got them with, I didn't break it out, but off the top of my head, when I did it at ACC Media Days, I think I had them with 5 conference wins. Okay, so They win the 3 out of conference, 5 conference wins, gives them 8 wins total.
Gotcha. Mike?
Oh, man. Now we're going to play the fun game of do Cal and Stanford make a bowl game? Which I played this game on the individual season previews, and I came away saying, no, I don't think either one of them makes a bowl game, right? And I looked at each of the individual conference schedules. They didn't look too particularly enticing, right? I'm going to give both, Joey. I'm going to give the total wins. I'm going to give the conference wins. I, too, think SMU is going to go 8 and 4. That is the prediction I gave on the individual team preview for SMU that I recorded with Billy Embody, who was excellent, one of their beat writers for On3. I'm high on SMU in particular because of what they return across the board and how they've attacked the transfer portal in the trenches. This is something, look, Rhett Lashley has he's got the background of power conference football as a coach, right? He understands what it takes to win in the ACC. He's been in this conference before as a coordinator, and I think that's reflective in what he did in the portal to get SMU ready to make the jump to the ACC. This is a team that was obviously very, very good in the American last year, won the conference title over a very good Tulane team. They returned two really, really capable quarterbacks. Lashley already said that both Kevin Jennings and Preston Stone are both going to play. I really like what they did on the offensive line, the defensive line, the portal, and they're returning talent across the board. Really good players on offense and on defense at the skill positions in the secondary defensively, and then at receiver and running back as well. But they have a really, really tough conference schedule, right? They draw Florida State. They draw Louisville. That Pittsburgh game is going to be flying under the radar a little bit. That's going to be a tough game. And then out of conference, they have TCU before they even get into ACC play. So we're going to find out pretty quickly just how good SMU is by the end of September.
Mm-hmm.
So with all that said, I said SMU is going to go 8-4. I think they probably get to 5 conference wins doing that, because I'm iffy on the TCU game. So I'll just say they go 3-1 out of conference, and say they get to 5 conference wins to get to get to 8-4. Stanford and Cal, I think both teams are going to be just fighting to get to like 4 to 5 wins total. So let's just say maybe 10 or 11 conference wins total across the board, and then maybe like 8-4 is 12, maybe like 16, 17 wins total. I'm having a lot of trouble seeing Cal or Stanford make a bowl game. Stanford in particular, brutal schedule, and just obviously a really, really hefty rebuild there. Mm-hmm. Cal is in a little bit better spot in terms of what they return, and a little bit easier schedule than Stanford, but it's a tough jump for both of those schools in my opinion. So I don't think either one of them make a bowl game. So I'm gonna settle on around 10 or 11 conference wins total, I think, across the 3 schools, and maybe right around 15, 16 wins total. It's tough, man. It's really hard to imagine Cal or Stanford making a bowl game year one.
Yeah, I'm more in the 8 to 9 conference wins range. I think Stanford probably gets 1. I've got Cal for probably 3, and I'm a little lower on SMU than you guys are. I got SMU about 4-4 in conference. I do think Cal is going to find a way to make a bowl game, or they'll at least get close. I don't know that they'll do any worse than 5-7, but I think they'll kind of flirt with bowl eligibility, most likely, if not actually fully get there. SMU, I got SMU going like 7-5. I looked at all those teams that went from the AAC to the Big 12 last year. You look at Houston, you look at Cincinnati, you look at UCF. UCF did a little bit better than the other two. BYU struggled even jumping into that league. Like, there is just a level of depth within your roster, and especially within the trenches, that I think SMU is going to be good. They are going to probably be an upper half of the ACC kind of level program within a year or two. It probably won't take that long. I just don't think that they're there quite yet, and so I think some of the expectations a little bit lofty for them. So I've got my expectations a little bit tampered from that standpoint. So I'm going to say Stanford probably wins 1. I've got Cal winning like 3 conference games, and then SMU winning 4, maybe 5 for SMU. I think is possible. So I'm kind of between 8 and 9, and I do think SMU and I'm going to say Cal both make a bowl game, and then Stanford, I got like 3 and 9. I think it might be a rough year on the farm.
You do bring up a good point in that at ACC Media Days, I talked to Rhett Lashley about making that change, making that jump, and he spent a lot of time talking to other coaches, including Gus Malzahn and some other guys who had already made the jump, to try and figure out what the biggest difference was. And they said it's the margin of quality between your 1s and your 2s. That's the difference in being able to succeed. You can get away with your 2s being guys who wouldn't start, even if they had to, at an AAC program. at a Power 4 program, your 2s really need to be 1A. You need to have your 1s and your 1As and minimize that gap in your depth.
Yeah.
Yep.
They feel like they did it. We'll see. I
Yeah.
mean, it's going to be interesting. They're a total wild card in terms of the ACC race. They're a total wild card, I think.
I also think the ACC people are overlooking SMU. When you talk to the folks, the other coaches, the media people, there was really a lack of insight as to what SMU brings to the conference in terms of football.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Definitely don't underestimate them. I mean, they've got the firepower. They've got one of the probably 4 or 5 best quarterbacks in the conference.
Yeah.
Full stop, if not, one of the top, either the best or, top 2 or 3,
Right.
I'm looking at our rundown here, and I'm just going to bring this up too because I don't think we're going to talk about SMU that much more throughout the rest of this. I went and did a little bit of research in the last week or two on, SMU went, what was it, 11-3 last year, I think?
Correct.
So they won 11 games. SP Plus ranks of the 11 games that they won. Memphis 55, Tulane 59, North Texas 86, Rice 103, East Carolina 111, Louisiana Tech 112, Navy 113, Tulsa 114, Temple 127, Charlotte 129, Prairie View A&M FCS number 88. Meaning 8 of their 11 wins came against teams rated worse than Wake Forest. So I realized they were good last year. They looked good. They won a lot of games, but this is a significant step up in competition, especially from what was a depleted AAC last year from what it had been in previous years.
Fair enough.
It's fair. Yep.
Just throwing that out there. So, fair
just
enough.
for research.
All right, question number 2. Will one of the following teams make a bowl game? And these are all 4 of these teams are teams that have Vegas win totals of 4.5 or less. So you have Boston College, Virginia, and Wake Forest, all that have win totals of 4.5. And then I have Stanford on here. Their Vegas win total is 3.5. Does one of those 4 teams make a bowl game?
I'll start. I'm going to say no. I think Wake Forest is probably the one that gets closest to that. I think Wake has a chance to go 5-7. 6-6 would not surprise me. Had that conversation with, I can say, our buddy Connor O'Neill, Tony, because I know you know him quite well from the Wake beat.
Connor and I are good friends. He's a good guy.
We love Connor.
Yep.
We had Connor on to talk Wake Forest. We've had him on a number of times now. He's great. I think I settled on 5. I can't remember what I said, Joey. I think I settled on 5-7. It was one of the first previews I did. I think they have a chance to win 5 or 6. I'm low on UVA. That's not me just talking as a Tech alum. I'm just low on UVA. I think they're kind of a mess.
Schedule's pretty brutal too.
Schedule is really, really rough. Stanford, I already briefly touched on their schedule, plus just that lofty rebuild. I think 3 to 4 wins would be a pretty good season. Boston College, their schedule is no walk in the park. Florida State, obviously, in their opener in week 1. At Mizzou, brutal. You're going to be at least a 2-score underdog there. You host Michigan State, which you absolutely have to have. Right, you have to have it. You go to Virginia Tech, you host Louisville, you go to SMU, Syracuse, UNC, and Pitt. Those are toss-ups at best. I don't see it with BC either. I'm going to go with none of these 4 teams make a bowl game. But I think if I had to pick one to come out of that packet, is Wake Forest.
Tony?
Exact same thoughts, actually. Going over my notes that I made earlier this morning, and I said Wake could get to 6. I don't think they will. They could. The defensive secondary is still lacking, and they lost a lot last year. And just too many question marks on the offensive line yet again. We're sitting here a week before the season opener. There is no starting quarterback yet. And, Dave Clawson is doing it on purpose because last year naming Mitch Griffiths in spring camp turned out to bite him in the rear end when, lo and behold, turns out Mitch Griffiths wasn't a viable D1 quarterback. So he's letting Hank Bachmeier and Michael Kern play it out for as long as he can. They're both going to wind up playing in the season opener against North Carolina A&T. He'll figure it out from there. They could get to 6. I don't think they will. I think 5 and 7 is their threshold. And I don't see any of the other 3 coming even close to being 6 and 6 and bowl eligible.
Man, I really want to say yes. I tend to think, it's pretty perfectly ACC that one of these teams is going to be substantially better than we think they're going to be.
No doubt.
It could be a surprise. And Virginia is the team that really sticks out to me that, like, if that schedule were a little bit more forgiving, like, I definitely would have thought that they'll make a bowl game. And honestly, some of that could come down to how the quarterback situation plays out there. We have our opinions on this podcast of who should be starting and versus who they're probably going to start, so we'll see about that. Boston College too, a program that historically has not had that many like missing bowl eligibility type seasons, but new coach might be a really funky fit between Bill O'Brien and Thomas Castellanos. I want to say yes, but I'm probably with you guys that I can't pick any one of the. Let's say yes. Let's say Wake Forest gets there. Let's say Wake Forest gets there.
There it is.
You were dying to say yes to somebody.
Yeah, let's go with Wake Forest. Can't keep Dave Clawson down for too long. So
that you can't.
Let's say rebound year for Wake Forest. They get to 6 and 6. So
can't take him out the pasture, Joey.
It's not time for that yet. Not time for that yet.
Not time for that.
On the other side, a couple teams it might be time for. Well, one team in particular might be time to take them out the pasture. Question number 3.
Oh God.
Well, one of the following teams with a win total of at least 7.5 miss a bowl game. And there are a number of teams that had win totals of like 8, 8.5 and higher. And I didn't think it was even reasonable to entertain the idea that any of them would be missing bowl games. So I didn't include them here. But 3 teams with a win total of 7.5. Do any of these miss a bowl game? Number 1, North Carolina. Number 2, SMU. Number 3, Syracuse.
I'll let you go first, Tony.
If there is a team, first of all, I think all 3 of them make a bowl. But if there's a team that is on the line that could drop below the line, it's going to be Syracuse. Look, they made a huge improvement with the quarterback, Kyle McCord, but you got a first-year coach. And I watched Fran Brown and I listened to Fran Brown, and I shrugged my shoulders. I don't know what Syracuse has in terms of a lot of depth at the skill position. They've got some good skill position players. I don't think they have depth on the defensive line, not enough to sustain them through an ACC schedule. If there is a team that could, out of those 3, that could drop below the 6 wins, it's going to be Syracuse. North Carolina and SMU, for me, are a lock to make the bowl games.
Joey, I'll let you go second.
I'm going to jump in here.
Yeah.
I've got my questions about Syracuse as well. And it seems like, and especially listening to the preview we did with Emily Liker, there is a healthy contingent of that fan base, it sounds like, that is full-scale drinking the orange juice up there. That they might go 9-3 or 10-2 or something like that. And I'm not on that page at all. I think there's a chance that they could miss a bowl game. But I'm actually going to take this opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and just plant a flag coming into the season.
I've been waiting for this. I know where this is going. I've been waiting for it.
You can go ahead and count me out on North Carolina. I'm going to say right now, North Carolina is going to miss a bowl game. I think they're going to go 5 and 7. I think this is going to be a bit of a mess for North Carolina. And again, I listened to the show that, Mike, you did with Rod Baxley, and you talked about how there's so much good skill talent on that offense. And we talked about how we changed defensive coordinators and brought in a really well-regarded defensive mind to run that defense. And I also heard that we no longer have like a top 5 NFL draft pick at quarterback. And I also heard that we have significant questions at the offensive line. And I also look at the history, and since the start of this show, like 9 years ago, that's been 2 head coaches and like 5 defensive coordinators. And I don't remember a single time that North Carolina has ever had even like a decent defense. I think they've got way too many questions, and I think the thing that's been buoying them for a few years is now gone. And I think that, you know, say what we will about Jeff Collins, I've got my opinions to be sure, but I don't think that he's some savant that's going to come in and fix this. I think whatever is ailing this defense is in the walls at North Carolina. And I don't think that goes away until Mac Brown is gone and you find someone to completely change the culture of that program. So I'm planting the flag right now. I think North Carolina going to be a little bit in the range of some cheeks this year. I think they're going to be on the bottom end of the ACC. 5-7 for North Carolina. They're missing a bowl game. I'm out.
Wow.
Can we pull that quote in the range of some cheeks and put that and make that a sound drop? Scott, we're at the 21-minute mark when you're editing this. Just clip that, will you?
North Carolina, some cheeks.
We're going to be able to use that when a team inevitably gets blown off of the field this fall in some random conference game. I think they all make a bowl game. So I agree with everybody's Syracuse takes. I agree with all of them. The one thing I think that's benefiting Syracuse is, well, two things. We're going to find out pretty quickly if Ohio State had a McCord problem, right? Or like, what was McCord just not good enough for Ohio State, or was he just like not good enough? Period. And like his numbers were pretty good last year, right? And I understand he didn't have the running element to their offense that they've been missing for a few years now, and he was an easy target because they were shuffling quarterbacks all through September, or at least behind the scenes they were pretending to, before they officially named McCord the starter for the rest of the year. They were trying to push him out the door, but you know, I think midway through fall camp they were like, look, we got to have a better quarterback for 24. It's just kind of the way that was going. I think McCord is an upgrade from the corpse of Garrett Schrader and Dan Villari, who plays tight end, who played quarterback last year, and that other backup that his name's escaping me right now. They were a total mess at quarterback last year. McCord is a clear step up. LaQuinn Allen, good running back. I think Syracuse will be fine, especially when I look at their schedule, and their schedule is pretty soft. Like they have, I think even for a team with questions with a first-year head coach, they got a decent amount of gimmies there. Ohio should be pretty bad. Stanford, Holy Cross. At UNLV is going to be a swing game, so keep an eye on that. But they closed the season at BC, which is a winnable game. At Cal, we'll see. They host UConn, obviously very winnable. I think they make a bowl game. Might go under the win total, but I think they'll make a bowl game. The other two, SMU, I kind of already explained that, so we'll just kind of gloss over that a little bit. North Carolina, I get the points about the defense. I understand. Offensive line, I get it. I think the line will be good enough in the run game. At least Rod Baxley made that compelling argument. And Amarian Hampton's an All-American candidate at running back, so I think that's enough. I think that'll be enough. And I get the defense point, Joey. Totally get it. If we think this is going to be like somewhere in the 5 to 7 win range, you can talk me into it. But Mac Brown also does his best work when his teams are overlooked. Like his best North Carolina teams in the second stint have been when they've entered the year with like no expectations. But again, they had Sam Howell at quarterback, or they had Drake May at quarterback. This is obviously very different with Max Johnson. But Max Johnson's been around. He's competent enough. And with, I think, a good running game, some improvement on defense, that should be enough to get you to 6 wins at the very least.
The other thing with the other quarterbacks you mentioned was a lot of them were running a Phil Longo offense. which
Yeah,
makes a huge difference.
Fair point. That's
Phil
fair point.
Longo is one of the best OCs in the country. That having been said, I still think there's enough there. I think they're the inverse of what Joey said. I think it's a 7-5 team. So below the 7.5, but certainly still going to a bowl game of, around Christmas Day somewhere, one of those.
See you in the Independence Bowl or wherever.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I figure we'll come back to Mac Brown here in just a minute. But, yeah, I mean, the Syracuse thing also interesting to me again. I mean, you mentioned Kyle McCord, and not being good enough for Ohio State means you're not one of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks in the country, and that's not really a slight against you. But,
Agreed.
He's also got a better receiver core that he's throwing to at Ohio State than he'll be thrown to at Syracuse, so
by a wide margin,
by a lot, yeah.
But also playing a different level of competition, so it's like, there's a lot of things here that we don't know how it'll turn out. And one of the other things I've always said, and that always sticks out to me, is with a new head coach, you got a first-time head coach, and especially at Syracuse, by the way, first-time play callers on both sides of the ball, if I'm not mistaken. I think there's definitely a chance for some hiccups there. So I was a little bit surprised seeing a win total of 7.5. I mean, I kind of get it with some of the talent they brought in and the transfer portal and seeing what the schedule is, but I think there's room for things to get a little bit squirrely in upstate New York this year, at least for year one. So we'll see how all of that goes. Question number 4: does the ACC have a Heisman Trophy finalist, and if so, who is it? And this is a question that we had last year. I think a couple of us said Jordan Travis. He actually ended up finishing 5th. And in some years, that would be a finalist. Last year, it was not. I have to think he would have been in New York if not for breaking his leg.
We got jobbed on
November.
That. Yeah, we got jobbed on that, yeah.
We were on the right track.
Yeah.
And just another note that the ACC has not had a Heisman winner since one Lamar Jackson the year that we started this podcast. So with that being said, 2016. So, Tony, do you have the ACC with a Heisman Trophy finalist?
No. There's, as much as the conference wants to go in, they were touting it throughout ACC media days, the conference of quarterbacks. Ironically enough, most of the quarterbacks were coming from somewhere else. You look at the long list of quarterbacks, and yes, the ACC has great quarterbacks. Most of them we picked up, from other schools. Thanks for developing them. But no, I don't think there's anybody at that elite enough level. And when I look around the country, you pointed out that Jordan Travis finished 5th, didn't have enough votes to get there. Some years it's close enough. The top 5 go. This wasn't the case. I could see an ACC quarterback, or I can see Armarian Hampton from North Carolina at a number 5, but not having enough to get to New York. Especially when I look around the country, see so much of the quarterback talent around the country, then I don't think the ACC gets somebody there.
Yeah. I don't either, but if there was one I would pick, it's Cam Ward at Miami. And the reason why is because the Heisman has become largely a quarterback award, as we know. So in order to be in that conversation, you got to put up gaudy numbers, right? And I think of Cam Ward, I think of a guy who gets it done in the passing game and on the ground, and I think about what a game script is going to look like. Now, I expect Miami's defense to be very good, but I expect Miami to throw the ball a bunch. And I know they have Damian Martinez at running back. He was, first team Pac-12 guy last couple of years. Very good running back, but their pass catchers are really good, and they're going to want to throw the ball a ton. And this is the best offensive line that Cristobal has had at Miami since he's gotten there. So they're going to throw it around quite a bit. Cam Ward adds the element with his legs as well. I just think from a game script standpoint, and there are a bunch of dual threat quarterbacks in the ACC that we can talk about, right? We can go up and down the list. There's a bunch of them. There's Haynes King, there's Kyron Drones, there's Grayson McCall. We can go up and down the list. But if you're going to give me a guy with kind of the complete package with the skill set at receiver that maybe won't rely on the running game quite as much, like I look at a guy like Kyron Drones, for example. Tech's got like nobody behind him.
Right.
So they're going to keep an eye on, I think, running him more than they need to. They ran him a bunch last year, but the quarterback situation was a little bit different. I don't think they're going to want to do that this year. Cam Ward, I think Miami's they're kind of pushing all their chips to the middle of the table this year with kind of what they have here and expectations, everything else. If there was one guy, he would be it. But the answer is no. The answer is no for me as well.
Yeah. Cam Ward, obviously, too, he was probably the top quarterback in the transfer portal. He's got a bit of a media hype machine behind him. He was the preseason ACC player.
He's at Miami. At Miami.
Yeah. Miami, a team that has a chance to win the ACC, go to the playoff, like all these things. I think that's probably your top candidate. I'm with you guys. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say it doesn't get done. And I think it's either it kind of feels like it's Cam Ward or bust. And I agree that the other name that came to mind was Amarian Hampton. I mean, if he were to go for 1,500 yards and 18 touchdowns or something like that, I mean, you'd have to think so. Even if they were 7-5, 8-4, like you'd have to think that you would get some attention for that. But I'm with you that it feels like the top teams in the ACC are without the true super elite quarterback talent that would really kind of get somebody there. So
a lot of good quarterback talent, but I think you nailed it, Joey. Not elite level talent.
Yeah,
a lot of very good quarterback talent, not elite.
Yeah,
Great.
We don't have Deshaun Watson. We don't have Trevor Lawrence. We don't have
Lamar.
Take your pick. Lamar,
yeah.
So I think that's kind of the difference here, and that's what we'll be missing. So I'm in agreement. I don't think we have anybody in New York come December, but we will see. Question number 5. How many head coaching changes will happen between now and 1 year from today? So first of all, I want to clarify, this does not mean, in December or in January. Stuff happens in the offseason too. I mean, we just saw a couple weeks ago, what was it? Blake Anderson at Utah State was gone. A year ago, around this time, you had Pat Fitzgerald out at Northwestern. Like, this stuff happens late in the season for whatever reason. But I will say, new coaches this year, you had Bill O'Brien at Boston College after Jeff Hafley went to the NFL. You have Manny Diaz at Duke after Mike Elko left to go to Texas A&M. And you have Fran Brown at Syracuse after Dino Babers got fired. So a lot of different ways this can happen. Are we firing Tony Elliott or Pat Narduzzi? Is Mac Brown or Dave Clawson retiring? Is someone taking a bigger job or jumping to the NFL? Or would there even be a strange off-field situation of, Dabo becomes a minister or a transfer portal consultant or something like that, Mike, what do you foresee here?
Oh, man. The safe answer is 2. That would be Tony Elliott. That would be Mac Brown, right? For kind of differing reasons. That's the safe answer. That's the one I'm going to go with. I could see 3, right? Maybe Tony saves himself, but maybe Dave Clawson really bottoms out. Tony, you would know this better than me, covering the Wake Forest beat. And Connor O'Neill kind of mentioned this, but like Dave's pretty safe. Like it would have to be like horrendous, and they'd still probably get another year. So like I find it unlikely with Wake. But the one name that you mentioned, Joey, that I think could definitely be on the chopping block, we'll call it, if things go really, really sideways, is Narduzzi at Pittsburgh. He's been there a really long time. Pitt wants to purport themselves into like a serious football program, which they really haven't been. And like I know they won an ACC title a few years ago, but like they haven't really been that consistently. They haven't been like the program that they think they are in like 30 years, 40 years maybe. It's been a real when was Dorsett there? It's been a while, right? So I would keep an eye on Narduzzi. So I'm going to say 2 and be safe and just say it's Mac and one other coach, probably Elliott if it gets real bad. Maybe 3.
Yeah. I'm gonna say 2 as well, and Mac Brown definitely. I mean, it's if I'm picking them to go 5-7. I realize that a guy like that with his track record, like that's not how you want to go out. But I wonder how long is like North Carolina going to put up with this and keep doing this, where there's clearly some unrealized potential within that program with Mac at the helms at this moment. So I'm going to say they figure out something, if it's an agreed upon retirement or something, that he is not the head coach this time next year. And then, I figure one more of these happens, but it's in a lot of years, especially with 17 teams, I would think 3 to 4, is a reasonable number. But I look at all of the relatively new head coaches here. I look at the spots that would be most likely to fire. And like we said, Dave Clawson is not getting fired at Wake Forest. Dave Doran has historically had some wandering eyes. I don't think he's leaving at this point. Like, there's a number of these situations that's like, I don't think anything's going to change. I think we're coming back with probably 15 of the same head coaches next year. So I'm going to go ahead and just say 2 of them. I noted too, Mike, in your conversation with Justin Ferber about Virginia, that it seems they really don't want to fire Tony Elliott.
I was talking to Tony about that before you jumped on, before we hit record. They really, really want that to work. Mm-hmm. They really, really want that to work. And that was an interesting part of that conversation, because I think from the outside, and hell, Tony, I mean, you mentioned last year on the podcast, you were like, you know what, keep an eye on Elliott. And, obviously the shooting that happened at the end of his first year, you naturally give a guy a little bit more time, just because that's an unprecedented thing that you have to deal with within your program. But Justin Ferber's comments about Carla Williams just really, 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 really wanting it to work, because she wanted him to come to Charlottesville so bad. And that was clear, right? It was the whole back and forth with the contract at the beginning. He comes to Charlottesville, and it just hasn't gone great so far. So, I mean, it would have to really, really be bad for him to even get fired, Justin said, right? Like, it would have to be 2 wins, probably, like 2-10. And I don't think I've placed my flag in the UVA is not going to be very good, but I mean, 2-10 would be a surprise. I still think they're like 4 to 5 wins, probably, depending on what they do at quarterback. So they really want that to work.
I'm going way off the reservation here, guys. I'm going 3 to 4 changes. The most likely ones, and let's start with, Clawson's not going anywhere. He could go 4-8 a second season in a row, and he's not on the hot seat. They love Dave there, one of the most successful coaches in program history. He fits the model of Wake Forest and who and what they are as an academic institution. I asked Dave because I've talked to a lot of the ADs throughout the conference, and a few of them have called Dave one of the smartest guys in all of college football. Not in terms of, they weren't talking in terms of X's and O's, but the game, the NCAA, the big picture, what happens next in the chess game that is college football, and have said he could have any job he wants in college football when he's done coaching. So I actually asked him, because he knows that I'll back him into a corner, put him on a spot, whatever you want to use there. And I asked him, I said, would you consider this? And he said, well, if I'm 4-8 again, I may be available sooner than, most would think. He said, but yeah, I would want to do something like that. He said, I think I have a couple more years coaching, few more at most. And he said, the game's given me a lot, and I owe it to the game to give something back. So yeah, I could see doing something like that. But in the meantime, he's safe. I'm going to tell you, with another bad season, I think Narduzzi's out.
Yep.
I can see Mac Brown retiring, whether he's 5-7 or 7-5, which is what I think they'll go. I can see him retiring.
Yep.
He was cranky as all get out on that topic at ACC Media Days. Because it's being used against him. Yeah, it's being used as a recruiting tool against him. And he was just cranky as all get out on the subject. Here's my third one. And this is where there's a little bit of hypocrisy in me, but I'll learn to live with it. The other one is the reason why Cam Ward will not be a finalist for the Heisman. Mario Cristobal.
Hell
Goodbye.
yeah. Spicy.
Keep going.
Spicy. Turn up, Tony.
The college football, look, I covered him at Oregon when I was out on the West Coast covering the Pac-12. He is a great recruiter. He is not a good in-game coach. His mistakes cost them wins at Oregon. It cost them wins at Miami. And Miami still has a tone of what they should be. Not what they are, but what they think they should be. And Mario Cristobal is an impediment to them getting to what they think they should be. There's and we were joking about this a little bit before. There's the phrase, and I can't remember, who it was, the NFL coach, who said, that he wanted to say in personnel as well, because if you're going to make me cook the dinner, I want to do the grocery shopping, right? Here's my problem with Cristobal. Because in the college game, you get to do both. You are in charge of the personnel and you do the coaching. So let's talk about the shopping and the cooking. Mario Cristobal's Instacart. I will let him do the shopping for me. Stay out of my kitchen, brother. I don't want you getting anywhere near the dinner. Mario Cristobal is Instacart. He can do all the shopping for me, but that's it. That's it. I think now, and here's the hypocrisy of it. When I had to pick the teams in order, I wound up picking them third, but I wasn't convinced of that third. They could slip to fourth easily. They could slip. They could wind up at 7-5, 8. I don't know. Here's the thing. I'm not convinced that 8-4 saves his job. He's one game under 500 in his tenure at Miami. He's I think overall, and granted, he was coaching at Florida International, so you do what you do. But, look, his career win percentage, he's 2-3 games over 500. Not that big a deal, frankly. And under delivering, if you look at, being on however many voting panels it is that I'm on these days, you realize there's not a lot of weight that you put on the preseason watch list because, every one of them has 80 players on there. But he's got all 3 wide receivers on the Bolitnikov preseason list. He's got Cam Ward on every list imaginable for quarterbacks and potential player of the year. The college football world is telling Mario Cristobal, you got tons of talent, man. You got tons of talent, which is why I'm not even sure 8-4 even saves his job. It depends what those 4 losses are and how bad they are. I think Cristobal could be on his way out. Well, Instacart could be, somewhere else.
I've had some Instacart drivers I certainly wouldn't let in my kitchen, so I think that's totally fair.
Exactly.
I talked to Cam Underwood about that and asked him, would he be coaching for his job in the sense of if you go 7-5 again, you've spent a hell of a lot of money on players and coaches and all of this stuff to then not cash in here. And he seemed adamant that no, it's definitely a failure if you go 7-5, but he wouldn't fire him. But man, I don't know.
Here's the other thing though, too. And this is digging into the weeds and a whole other topic that we don't need to delve into too far. So I'll make it quick. They are on the cusp of losing their primary collective source of money. Life Wallet, which is the name of the corporation.
Yep.
And also the name of the collective.
Death Wallet.
Gave an earnings report last week where one of the principals of the company said, I don't know how much longer we can continue to operate. They're under investigation by the Federal Trade Commission, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the DOJ, and their stock is at about 24 cents a share as of yesterday. The John Ruiz, the head of it, said, "Oh, we've completed all of our NIL commitments. Yeah, the ones you made in the past, There was no reference to the ones current or in the future. If you keep going 7-5, and let's just say it's another 7-5 season, you're going to have a hard time getting someone to step in and commit the kind of money that you need that Ruiz has been giving all these years.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, the business end of it. At some point, it's not just the football part of it; it's the business end of it that steps in.
Well, that's kind of where we're at in college football these days, right? It's not all about the football; it's about the business end of it. And yeah, that's. I remember when that story first came out like a couple of years ago. I was like, yeah, this sounds a little too good to be true. And oh, look.
Yep.
Oh, look.
Last year, we talked about it last year. And I know that I said on this show last year, because I said it widely, you got to watch out for Ruiz. Anybody who is that boisterous on social media, that braggadocious, there's something else going on behind the curtains. And there we are. And you're right. It is about the business part of it now.
Yep.
He's got to take some advice from one Chris Carter. Get yourself a fall guy. He's going to need one of those. And then Miami's going to need to get themselves another bad guy, it sounds like. So they're going to need to lock that down sooner rather than later.
What's Uncle Luke up to? Before we move to the next question, one other thing I want to bring up while we're talking about potential coaching changes, and it's something we really didn't hit on all that hard here, but I think one of the things that has been interesting to me about the ACC the last few years is how much we have developed kind of the, I don't know what the right word is, but like a council of elders within some of these head coaches of Narduzzi and Doran and Clausen and Dabo and some of these guys that have been in their seats for like upwards of 10 years. And that's a lot of coaches to have that long of a tenure going. And kind of combining that with the idea that some of these guys that have done this head coaching thing for a long time get really fed up with what college football is now versus what it was 10 years ago.
Yep.
I just wonder if, and again, you talk about Tony, like they're not going to fire Dave Clawson.
No. But
does Dave Clawson get a little fed up with this and say, I don't know if I need this anymore? Or Pat Narduzzi, do they fire him or does he say, I don't know if I need this anymore? Or Dabo for sure. At what point does he, so I just wonder if we see another example after Jeff Hafley last year where someone kind of walks away and says, I'm good with this.
I think you bring up a really good point, Joey, and we go back to the business part of it, and we go back to the idea of the settlement that will come next year with House versus NCAA, right? It is the most formative change in college sports in the last 50 years, probably since Title IX. It's bigger than the O'Bannon suit because the O'Bannon suit was supposed to be narrow in terms of NIL. This transforms the way college sports operate completely. This is revenue sharing. This is NIL being allowed to be moved in-house, right? The rules before were the schools can't talk to the collectives. We know they did, but can't talk to the collectives. The NIL is strictly between the athlete and the sponsor. School not now. You've got Alabama hires a general manager. It's not to monitor personnel and recruiting. It's to run the business operations of what college sports is going to become. Look, if you're a young person a year or two out of college and you want to get into college football or college sports, the business side of it is the way to go because all of these schools, they're not all going to hire an $800,000 a year general manager, but they're all going to hire this kind of infrastructure with people who can review the NIL contracts now, people who can manage the accounting for the revenue sharing, people who can manage whatever role the collectives are still going to play. I've talked to a lot of administrators in the ACC. The best numbers that I can come up with, 85 to 90%, actually, let me do it the other way. 10 to 15% of the schools in this country will still have a relationship with their collectives, but it'll be for the other sports. It'll be raising money for the non-football and probably non-basketball sports because the major ones require licensing agreements for NIL deals and it requires stuff like that. and they're going to want to keep that in-house. The other 80% or 85% will get rid of the collectives altogether and take everything in-house. College sports has had a love affair with the middleman for decades because the middleman could do the icky stuff that the schools didn't want to be responsible for. Now the schools are being told by a court of law, this is your responsibility going forward. They're going to get rid of the middleman because they don't need it, and they don't need to pay these fees or, you know, deal with these outsiders, be encumbered by outsiders. So having said that, I think that Clausen can deal with those changes better than he can with what the world is right now, because you can't get major fundraising at Wake Forest. It's the smallest school in the Power Four world. We estimated that there is a living alumni base of about 70,000 people. That's it. And so you can't keep hitting those same people over and over and over for NIL money, especially when you just completed a $45 million expansion of your football training facility. So this revolution will help. Who can't deal with the revolution? I don't know if Dabo can, because he hates it now, and I don't see how he sees this as any better. Does he walk away? I think he probably gives it a year or two more of seeing how these changes work before he walks away. He's not going to change his way of doing it. Absolutely not. Man, talking to him and Charlotte last month, it's clear he's dug his heels in even more.
I was going to say, he's so dug in at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I don't agree with him at all, but I will respect the fact that he's so convinced he's right that he won't compromise. I think it's a huge mistake. I think it cost the program. There were tons of good receivers available in the portal during the offseason, and he got none of them. And he needed them. He needed help at the receiver position.
And he recruited all these guys. He recruited all these guys the first time. He recruited them out of high school. I mean, it's just crazy. He talks about the culture and everything else, and he recruited all those guys.
Absolutely. But to your point, Joey, I think, you know, like you were saying, the business part of it, we're about to see the biggest change ever, assuming that the judge signs off on it. And I think she probably will. Just a quick 10-second little, hey, did you know kind of thing. This is the same judge who was the presiding judge in the O'Bannon versus NCAA case. It's the same judge. So there's a little interesting factoid. I think she'll sign off on it with some changes, tweaks, whatever, but it'll get there. The intervention by a dozen or 2 dozen athletes won't matter. Not when you're talking about thousands of athletes learning to live with it. But that could force some changes in the coaching ranks for sure.
Yeah. Was it the O'Bannon case that went all the way to the Supreme Court that became a 9-0 case?
Both that and the Alston case 3 years later. The O'Bannon case was NIL. Ed was, because I've talked to Ed about it, Ed was sitting there playing the EA Sports basketball game, and he's like, wait a minute, that's me on the screen. Nobody asked me for permission to use me, and I certainly never saw any money. And it was because the NCAA owned the licensing rights. And so that suit went all the way to the Supreme Court with a 9-0 vote. And then the Alston case was about there not being allowed to be a cap on what the schools were providing for presumably educational materials for athletes, but that includes their travel for athletics and things like that. Also a 9-0 case with Associate Justice Kavanaugh referring to the NCAA as a cartel, which of course it is, has been for a long time. But here's, and I don't want to get too sidetracked with the other stuff that we want to cover, but everybody hit on that because that was easy. So you got the Paul Feinbaums and the Colin Cowherds and what? Oh, he called them a cartel. Yeah, okay, he did. But if you read the rest of his opinion, what he said was the NCAA does not have the judicial authority to make these rules and enforce them, but the conferences do, because there is a binding contract between the universities and the conferences. There is no such binding contract with the NCAA. It's a voluntary organization that you belong to. but there is a binding contract between the conferences and the university. So the conferences can create these rules, which is now where we go forward next year with House versus NCAA.
There you go. I guess the big takeaway there, though, is that historically the NCAA in proper United States court has not been stacking a lot of W's.
Which is why they don't do much now, because they're afraid of litigation. They tried to rein in the transfer portal and reinstate the rule that you had your one free transfer. If you transferred again, you had to sit out a year. Literally within 72 hours, 2 basketball players at West Virginia had them in court under violation of the Antitrust Act, and they won. So, the NCAA is just like, okay, fine, y'all do whatever.
Yep.
NCAA,
all day, we can see what's going to happen. Yeah.
NCAA against the Supreme Court in the range of cheeks, as you so eloquently put earlier, Joey. So.
In the range of cheeks, as we say around here. Yep. Question number 6. Let's do this as a little part A and part B. Part A, the ACC championship game. Will it include anyone not named Clemson, Florida State, or Miami? Tony?
No. It'll be 2 of those 3, and I think I made my point clear on my thoughts on Miami. Mm-hmm. So it tells you who I think is going to play in the championship game. I think it's a Florida State versus Clemson championship.
Let's take a quick second to remind you about Section103.com. It is the internet's premier place for all things wonderful Georgia Tech apparel. They've got t-shirts, they've got sweatshirts, they've got hoodies, they've got a short sleeve coach hoodie if you want to look like Coach Key. They've got onesies for babies. They've got all things for any man, woman, children, something for the whole family, all the Georgia Tech fans in your life. They need something from Section103.com. Use promo code GOACC for 10% off your first order. You can go get t-shirts supporting NIL efforts with guys like Haynes King and Zach Pyron. They've got shirts supporting the basketball team, the baseball team, the volleyball team, all sorts of wonderful Tech traditions, all sorts of things. Again, any Georgia Tech fan in your life, they need something from Section103.com. Once again, use promo code GOACC for 10% off your first order. I particularly love the Feliz Bobby Dodd sweatshirts. We got Christmas season coming up before you know it. You're going to want one of those for your holiday party. Go get it all at Section103.com. Huge shout out to Steven and the gang. Thank you so much to them for their support of the Basketball Conference podcast. We would love it if you guys would go show your support for Section103.com as well. Now, back to the episode.
Okay. That's fair. I'm going to do a relatively unprecedented thing on this podcast and believe in Miami going into the year. And I'm going to say Miami gets there. I'm going to say Miami gets there, and I'm going to say no, that the other team will be Clemson or Florida State. I'm going to say Clemson, and it's going to take me a little bit to fully explain maybe why I'm going to say that, but for now, I'm going to say, Miami against Clemson. And question number 2, who wins that game? Give me Miami. Give me Miami. Wow. I'm with you. I don't like it, and I have serious reservations about Mario Cristobal. As a Georgia Tech fan, I have had a front row seat to what some of those games might look like. Sure. I get it, but I feel like those teams are kind of all in the same tier, and it comes a little bit down to scheduling and who do you play, don't you play, and once you get there, I'm also I'm a little bit relatively out on Clemson. I think their best days are behind them, and for numerous reasons. But I just feel like it sets up too well and too cleanly for Miami to not get there. And once they do, I might feel better about Florida State if they were to get there, but I just don't know that they get there. So.
That's fair. I think Florida State gets there. There's enough talent at the skill positions. The defense will be good. Clemson, I think their defense is going to be very good. And I think Barrett Carter is probably one of the best linebackers in the country. My question with Clemson is we still don't know what Cade Klubnik is. 3 years later. You know, the Clemson fans couldn't wait to shove DJ Uiagalelei out the door so they could get to Cade. And 3 years later, we still don't know what Cade is. But I don't think they need Cade to be spectacular to win enough games to get to the championship game. I think they need him to be consistent, because the defense will win a few games for them on its own. So I think they wind up getting there. And I think Florida State winds up winning. I got a lot of faith in Norvell, frankly. I think in terms of recruiting, I think in terms of what a coaching job is now, he is among the best in the country in blending the portal and the high school recruiting. You know, in most years over the last 2-3 years, you can look at him as top 10 high school recruiting, top 10 portal gets. And I think that, and admittedly, I've been probably higher on him than most. I think DJ Uiagalelei has a really good season in a Mike Norvell system. I think it's really custom built to him. You know, at Clemson, they were trying to shove round pegs into square holes, and it absolutely did not work and really did a lot of damage to DJ's game. Fared a lot better at Oregon State when they kind of recreated the offense for him. Now I see that happening at Florida State, but with better talent around him. So the opportunity for him is going to be a lot better. So I see it as a Florida State Clemson, with Florida State winning in a, you know, probably not very exciting game, but you know, it's not going to be one where they're like, you know, oh my gosh, this is must see. It's going to be like, yeah, okay, it's the ACC, Florida State Clemson again. All right, here we go.
Yep. Seen this how many times before?
Yep, exactly.
Not in that particular game, but you know, in the regular season for sure.
Exactly.
The Florida State offense should still be very good, but it's definitely going to look different than it did last year. DJU, very different style of quarterback than Jordan Travis was. I don't think you have anything quite like a Keon Coleman or a Johnny Wilson on the outside. I think it's a little bit more of a ground and pound physical, you know, call it a little bit of an ugly offense, but it'll work. So it'll look different that way.
That's funny. You call it an ugly offense. I was thinking it's efficient.
Yeah. 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Do it 4 times, you got a first down. You know, I will say there is another tier of teams that I thought about. You know, does someone else get here? And it's again, NC State, high win total, Louisville, Virginia Tech, some of those teams, SMU even, a couple teams that a couple people have talked about. I've got big enough questions about each of those teams. Louisville, maybe of those, is like the one that maybe has the best shot to break in and get into the ACC championship game again. But there's a lot of turnover there, and that is a tougher schedule than they had last year. So just a lot of opportunities to trip up. So
they have a tough schedule. My third year of covering the ACC, I still don't know what to think of NC State. I really don't. I mean, the quarterback debacle last year was on Dave Doran. That was his fault, completely his fault. It became a cancer in the locker room. You know, presumably now, you know, he's got it fixed with McCall, and you know, because there's no doubt who the leader is in that locker room. But I still look at them. I mean, they lost a lot off the defense, last year's defense, and you don't easily replace a Peyton Wilson. I still look at it as they're still an 8 to 9 win team. They still are. And it almost feels like it would take an extraordinary series of events to get them into the double digits. I don't see where this is consistently a double-digit win program. It's consistently 9 wins, maybe 8 in a down year. So that's where I think they are again, and that's not going to be good enough to get you to the conference championship game.
They're so consistently an 8 to 9 win program that it is maddening to that fan base. They can't get to 10.
Yes, it is. It is maddening to the fan base. It is a fan base that looks for reasons to get mad. I will share with you, not the details of what was said to us, but because probably not proper for this show. But, I'm one of the presenters for the Nagurski Award for the best defensive player of the year. When Peyton Wilson didn't win it last year, the direct messages and text messages that were sent to me, that were sent to the Charlotte Touchdown Club, that were sent to the FWAA, which runs the Nagurski Award. Oh my gosh, it was, I have to think everybody in the city of Raleigh was on social media all at one time, because it was a constant. I got in the Uber on, to go home, probably about 45 minutes, and my phone was still lighting up. We should just stop. We should just stop giving out the award. We've ruined it forever. It has zero credibility. It's a useless award now. So they are. It doesn't take much to get the North Carolina State fan base mad. And so when you use the term maddening to them, because they can't figure it out either. They want to be optimistic. Yeah. And 8 to 9 wins, that's going to be really good with a lot of programs when you do it every single year. But they're always just a hair away from getting to that double digits and just can't get there.
Yeah. I will say, while we're talking about NC State, I look at it, and I mean, defensively, you're right, Tony, that they lose a good number of pieces. But I mean, I can't remember the last time that an NC State defense wasn't very good. Sure. Especially Dave Doran is a defensive guy. Like, yes, they are going to be good on defense. Offensive line in the trenches, I mean, they've always been pretty good. The skill talent, I think, is there and upgraded, honestly, from last year. Mm-hmm. Schedule is there. My biggest question, honestly, is about how does Grayson McCall fit in? And right, to your point, Tony, with the way that the quarterback situation, shook out last year, it wasn't the smoothest situation, to say the least. And I look at a guy like Grayson McCall, who, he's coming off an injury. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's had a lot of success, but all of that was in a really kind of specialized, tailored offense.
Correct.
In the Sun Belt.
Correct.
How much does that translate into this offense in the ACC for a full 12-game schedule? That's right. My biggest question about this whole thing is, you've got a big name transferring in here, but is that truly a silver bullet for the Wolfpack? I'm not so sure that it is.
I don't think it is. I don't think they have all the answers. And while they still have some talent on defense, I don't think it's at the high level that it was last year. Yeah. It is a good defensive team. Dave Doran is a good defensive coach, but I don't think that they have the incredibly high-end talent that they had last year.
Yep. Agreed. Mike had to step away for parenting duties here for a few minutes, so we'll check in on his ACC championship game pick when he gets back. But Tony, let's jump to our 7th and final question of the season. Sure. We've talked about the championship game. How many ACC teams make the new 12-team college football playoff, and how many wins do those teams combine for in the tournament?
I struggled with this one more than any of the other questions, because my initial inclination is one team makes it. The conference champion team makes it, and that's it. Then I'm like, wow, if I'm picking Florida State and Clemson should be good enough. Clemson could go in at a 10-2, 9-3. Which should be good enough to make it. But, look, you start playing out the math, and I think the SEC is going to get four teams in. I think the Big Ten gets 3 to 4 teams in. I think the Big 12 probably gets 1, but maybe gets 2. You've got a G5 that is going to get in. You start running out of room for anything beyond 1 or 2. So I started with 1. I ended up with 2. The 2 teams who play for the conference championship will make it. I think one of the things we need to start getting used to the idea of is, it used to be, oh my gosh, we lost a game. We're out. We're done. Then it was, when we expanded to 4, it was, oh, we lost a game, but we still got a shot. We can still move up. We are going to see if not this year, certainly in the years to come, a 9-3 team in the playoffs, maybe 2 of them. And it's going to be okay. And it may be the G5 schools that carry that, but it's actually really okay because it tells football coaches, it tells ADs, you don't have to get paranoid about 1 loss or 2 losses. And so maybe, just maybe, we wind up seeing schools go back to some good non-conference games. Not just scheduling 3 and 4 pansies because you're worried about losing a game or 2 games. And so maybe you wind up getting that. And which is good for college football. I'm applauding Alabama for playing at Wisconsin this year. It's the first time Alabama has traveled north of the Mason-Dixon line for an out-of-conference regular season game in more than a decade, probably about 15 years. So let's have more of those games. Let's have them on campus. Let's have USC and LSU not play in Las Vegas, but playing in the Coliseum and then play in Baton Rouge, because you can afford it, because a loss or even 2 losses is not going to necessarily wipe you out of the playoffs. So in terms of the ACC, just one other thought I would put in there. Talking to Dave Clawson and our big topic moments that I have with him, Clawson said the ACC does not have a football problem. It has a perception problem.
Mm-hmm.
He said, but the way to fix the perception problem is not what was all being talked about in Charlotte that week, which was, does the ACC network need its own version of Paul Feinbaum, basically a pimp for the conference? He said, that's not my fix. My fix is you have to win the big out-of-conference games.
Mm-hmm.
That fixes your perception problem. We're going to beat each other up inside the conference because we just do, but you got to win the big out-of-conference games. You must win those. That, he said, because it's not a football problem. He said, we got plenty of good football in the conference, but it's a perception problem, and the perception problem gets fixed with the football games on the field. So, I think that they still struggle with that. It's still not seen as an elite conference. It's not something that gets fixed overnight either.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think you get in, obviously, the guaranteed one, but I think you probably get a second one in.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think if nothing else, I feel like it would be bad branding for this brand new playoff in year 1 to not have a second ACC team in it and just
Good
be
point.
all SEC Big Ten.
Yeah, it's a good point.
So even if you want to, Illuminati deep state it and say like, oh no, they'll make sure that they get a second ACC team in. I think it makes sense that you end up with 2.
Sure.
I'll say that one of them will win 1 game in there.
Well, yeah.
And maybe that's Miami wins the ACC championship game and they are a top 4 seed, and then they win their first game, but then would probably lose in the semifinal. I just don't know that there's a team in this conference right now. Especially to your point, Tony, I don't know there's anybody this year that is equipped to go win a game against, a top 5 program in the sport. You start looking around at Georgia and Ohio State and Alabama and Texas and like all these. Like I just don't know.
I started looking through as I allocate 4 SEC, and I'm looking at Georgia and Texas, possibly LSU or Ole Miss before you even get to Alabama, and whether they make it or not out of the Big Ten. And I'm looking at Ohio State. I'm looking at Oregon. The Big 12 is wide open. But so, yeah, I think whoever wins the conference winds up winning a game, whoever that second team is. I'm not sure that you come in and beat a top 5 or 6 team or, however it falls out. I think that's what you got to get used to. We're looking at probably a couple of years of the 12 before we think about expanding to 14. I had a chance at the ACC Media Days to have a sit down with Lieutenant General Richard Clark, who is the new director of the college football playoff. And it was funny. He said, I like it when people don't refer to my rank anymore because I'm retired. And if they just call me Richard, then it really feels like I'm retired. But I'm like, yeah, but the dude's like a lieutenant general,
Yeah.
you know. And when you look at his bio picture and his chest full of medals, I'm like, okay, Richard.
I can ignore that.
Yeah, right, exactly. But his thing, but he pointed out, he said, we have not even put on the table the viability of an expansion until we at least get through 1, probably 2 years of the 12 team, because we got to figure out what works and what doesn't work before we even think about adding 2 more and doing a whole restructure all over again. So we're looking at this for a couple of years. And, you know, I think, you know, again, the ACC perception, yeah, you'll get a kick out of this. They had banners all over the Media Days event at the, where were we? The Hilton in Uptown Charlotte. And, you know, the conference of quarterbacks, every press release they put out, they make sure they have notes that they're the conference of quarterbacks. That's fine. They also had banners saying they have the most difficult out-of-conference schedule in the country. I looked at that and I'm like, why would you ever put that in writing?
Yeah.
Because if that is true, then the inverse is also true, which is the Big Ten and the SEC don't have the most difficult schedules because they're playing you.
Yeah, yeah.
So if yours is the most difficult because you're playing all these ACC and Big 12 schools, then the inverse is true. They're playing you, so it's not the most difficult.
Vandy has the toughest schedule in the SEC because they can't play Vandy, right?
Right.
Like it's that exact thing.
Exactly. So it's that kind of messaging and imaging that just is befuddling. I'm like, you probably could have put the best out of conference schedule or the most fun, whatever. But their messaging is part of the problem. But like Clausen said, you got to fix that on the field.
Yeah, well, you know, there's a piece of that Jim Phillips could probably account for as well, but that's a different discussion for a different day, I'd imagine.
Yeah. You can have me on a whole other time, and we'll spend an entire episode talking about, you know, my interactions and time talking with Jim Phillips. Yeah, it's, you know,
we need to plan on doing that because that would be a fun discussion, I'd imagine.
Absolutely. I spent so much of my off season in courtrooms in Tallahassee and Pickens County, South Carolina, and Charlotte, following all the lawsuits. My major in school was journalism. My minor was constitutional law. And so now I am at least capable of reading all of these legal briefs that, you know, I've had to create a whole filing section for in my office. And to get through them all and whatnot. But yeah, there are several schools which are struggling with Jim Phillips, you know, running the conference. So yeah, we'll have another conversation about that another time.
Yeah, no kidding. Sounds like you've had a hell of a summer there, Tony.
Not much of one.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, 2 teams make it in for the both of us. Mike let me know he's not going to be able to rejoin us for tonight. He had a situation he had to deal with, but he did let me know he has Miami over Clemson for the ACC title as well. So he and I are on the same page there. And Tony, you said Florida State over Clemson?
Yeah. So you guys have Miami winning it. I have Mario Cristobal getting fired. Go figure. Someone's going to be really wrong on this.
I was going to say, that situation that you've presented is not hard for me to imagine at all. I'll say that. Right. I'll say that for sure. All right. Well, that is our conference preview with 7 questions. So hopefully you all enjoyed that. Before we get out of here, Tony, I wanted to really quickly, we've got a couple of week 0 games to preview if you're good to roll through these real quick.
Sure.
All right, let's get into it. Week 0, we will start at noon on ESPN as the number 10 Florida State Seminoles taking on my Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. This is in Dublin, Ireland at Aviva Stadium. I think the teams both were flying over there tonight as we record this the evening of Wednesday, the 21st. Interesting little note that came out about this game. I guess it was mentioned maybe earlier this week. Alex Atkins, the offensive coordinator for Florida State, and I think their offensive line coach, he is suspended for this game and their next 2 games after this for NCAA violations.
Right.
I personally was unaware that we're still doing the NCAA violations thing, but apparently we are. Truthfully, I don't know if that makes that much of a difference. You know, he's the offensive coordinator, but he's not their play caller. That's
Correct.
Mike Norvell.
Correct.
I figure it's kind of a next man up situation there, not a big deal.
Yeah.
Florida State, a 10.5-point favorite here. Most recently, producer Scott, for what it's worth, a few days ago saw this at like 14.5. I think I was seeing numbers earlier the week at like 13.5. This number's coming down.
Mm-hmm.
There is some money coming in on Georgia Tech here for sure. Tony, Florida State 10.5. The total's 55.5. Do you have any thoughts, opinions on where this one ends up?
Because the number is coming down, I'm picking Florida State to cover. I think the 14.5 was too high. I can live with the 10.5. I think they cover, but I think I also take the under. I don't think this is a high scoring game. I like Haynes King. I like the offense. I like what DJU can do, but it's a weird game to start the season with, a conference game in Europe. It's just, it's a strange setup. So I'm taking the under on the total.
Yeah. I'm with you. I like the under. I feel like historically these Europe games are not high scoring, and understandably so, right? I mean, it's a weird situation, and pretty much always this week 0, week 1, like everyone's still kind of out of rhythm. I don't love that this number is coming down the way that it is, but I'm going to stick to my guns here. I'm going to take Georgia Tech in the points in this game. I think that, I look at this spot, and I see Florida State team that has so much turnover, so much production that they've got to replace. You've got a new quarterback. You've got you had like 8 draft picks, I think, in the first 3 rounds last year. I mean, there's a lot to replace there, kind of all over the board. It's week 1. It's week 0 even. It's overseas. It's a weird environment. There's going to be like 0 sense of home field advantage.
Right.
I think this it doesn't set up for them to run away with this. I don't think. I like the spot here for Georgia Tech. Mm-hmm. And I got to be honest with you, Tony. Give me the Jackets on the field. I think Georgia Tech coming off, they finished strong last year. You've got the quarterback coming back. I think that you swap out the defensive coordinator and the defensive coaching staff. I think there's enough of a jump there. Week 0, again, with all that Florida State's replacing, I like the spot, and this just feels like a perfectly ACC college football game that you have this game in Europe and the wrong team almost wins in a way. It's like if this game were in October in Atlanta or Tallahassee, I'm probably not picking it this way. But this spot, week 0 in Ireland, give me the Jackets. I think Georgia Tech wins the game. It's an upset, and we kick the season off right. And huge win for Brent Key and that staff.
Hey, I'm always for chaos. So I root for chaos every year. So if that's what happens, great. I'm all for it. Takes away my conference championship team, but hey, I'll learn to live with it.
Yep. I might look dumb by making this pick, but you know what? Let's take our shot here, and I think it's a good spot, and there's a chance they get this done. So I will say that I was listening to Cover 3 talking about this game, and one of the things that came up from a couple of them, they talked about game script, and it kind of feels like if either of these teams gets up by 10 to 14 points, neither one really wants to be playing from behind. I think of Georgia Tech, especially, defensively trying to keep up and trying to get stops versus, Florida State. And then Florida State, we've said that offense is going to be more run heavy. They don't really want to push the ball down the field throwing it, I don't think.
Right.
So I'd imagine, again, under 55.5, probably a lower scoring, closer kind of game. But yeah, sure. Give me Georgia Tech and to win this game outright.
All right.
Go Jackets. Mike, let me know. He's got Georgia Tech plus the 10.5, but Florida State winning. But he also had the caveat that if it goes under 10, if the spread gets into single digits, that he wants Florida State laying the points. So I think that makes sense.
Sure.
Other game at 8 o'clock on the CBS Sports Network, noted ACC channel here. The SMU Mustangs on the road in, what is this, Reno?
Yeah.
Is it Reno or Nevada? Yeah, Reno.
Yes. Yep.
Taking on the Nevada Wolfpack, 2 words. That's SMU, a 27.5-point favorite. Big favorites in this game. Total only 56.5. For what it's worth, Mike has SMU covering big. I think I'm with him, Tony. I I think if nothing else, they're going to try to make a statement here. I don't know that Nevada has a whole lot that's going to slow this down and really make this competitive.
It's a blowout. SMU jumps on them with probably a 3-touchdown lead in the first half.
Yeah, and
rolls pretty easily. Nevada doesn't have anywhere near the talent to keep up with SMU right now. Yeah. SMU's got one of the rarities, the quarterback who's been your guy for 4 years, been in your program, been in your system. I was covering SMU for 1 year, and it was the year that they signed Preston Stone on that December signing day. And Sonny Dykes, still the coach back then, was just in love with this kid. And Rhett Lashley has really utilized his talent very well. So I think SMU wins going away. They cover the spread.
Yeah. Yeah, this seems like the situation too. I mean, Rhett Lashley, I don't know that he's known for being modest with the offense or really, pulling off of the gas pedal later in games. So, just because they get a lead doesn't mean they're going to slow down. They're going to keep going. So, yeah, I think if I were betting this game, I would lay the points, and I would probably go over 56.5. I think SMU.
I would too.
They might get most of that themselves. So
yeah, I would too, because I'm looking at a 48-12 kind of game. So yeah, I would go with the over also, with, like you said, SMU covering most of the burden for that.
Yep. Well, there you go. All right, 2 week 0 games. That's good. A little appetizer for the ACC schedule, and we'll get to.
I'm ready. I'm ready for after court cases and all this administrative stuff. I'm ready for some football, brother.
Actual real football we can watch and talk about. Looking forward to that for sure.
Yes, sir.
Tony, this has been a ton of fun. Thank you again for coming on and giving us your time here. Do you want to tell the people real quick where they can go find your stuff?
Yeah, sure. Great. If you go to lastwordonsports.com and you click on the college football link, we now have 30 writers covering different teams for us all across the country. Right now they're wrapping up their fall camp and looking at the season ahead and position by position breakdowns and depth charts and things like that. So there's a lot going on. We've got an Instagram page, a Facebook page. We've got Twitter. Yes, I still call it Twitter. At Last Word on CFB. And then they can find me. I still have my original name from 10 years ago when I had a Twitter account and didn't even remember it, at Tony Bruin. So you can find me there.
Yeah, absolutely. Go do that. Tony is a ton of fun in his coverage of college football in general, and in particular the Wake Forest beat. So lots of good stuff there. And obviously, as mentioned, Tony, you spent a lot of time around the court cases, so that's a specific niche, that I think you cover better than most. So
I appreciate that. It gets convoluted, and we try to unconvolute it so that it makes sense for everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. Look forward to having you on again sometime soon. All right.
All right. Sounds good, Joey. Be well.
You too. Let's get out of here. Let's go watch some games. How's that sound? Let's go watch some games. We're going to come back, recap them. I don't know. We haven't talked about doing the live Saturday night recap. We might do that and see if we can get our training wheels going for the season. But we might do that. We might, have a recap coming your way Sunday evening or Monday morning. So keep it tuned here. And then obviously week 1 preview coming up early next week. So keep it tuned here as we rev up and get going with this ACC football season after what has been a very eventful offseason, to say the least. So looking forward to doing that. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those good places. Send us an email. Find us on YouTube, youtube.com/@the-ACC football podcast. Hit the like button, the subscribe button. We appreciate that. We're going for 500 subscribers this season. We are a little over 300. We need 200 more. We need your help to do it. So go hit that subscribe button there if you would, please. All right. That's all I've got. And we're going to come back and recap these games and get going into the season as we do. So keep it tuned here, as I mentioned. Let's get out of here. For Mr. Mike McDaniel, for Mr. Tony Siracusa, I am Joey Weaver. Thank you guys so much for listening. Enjoy the games. Enjoy the season. Until next time, go ACC.